to ask you, while we invite the panelists to come back up to the front and have a seat up here, so we can have the question and answer section, I'd ask you to join me in thanking our panelists once again.
Jim's got his own.
Nope, we have chairs. I'll stay here at the podium, you fellas sit down here. And I'd like to invite anybody who'd like to ask a question to stand, identify yourself please, and address whatever panelist you want or the panel in general.
Buzzes.
Oh,
Yep. Grab a chair.
there's a chair for him right there.
Okay.
Questions? Sir?
I have a question about the budget investment compared to the federal budget. It's when we compare to today, it looks like discouraging that never will be able to have such an effort. But if you scale it to the gross national product of the states, which rise from 0.5 trillion to 20 trillion today, to the fact that with money you can buy much computer equipment. So I think we should also represent it as an absolute value and to see what is affordable in terms of effort. I understand you don't need also 200,000 contractors eventually to do a new good program because some of it can be done automatically. And this is what costs money, which is corrected with inflation. So could we add also a figure of what, okay, in the new conditions, of course, a type of very ambitious program would cost to the economy and to the international partners and commercial partners.
Okay. I can do it.
He likes the workshop talk.
And that's fair enough. I mean, there's other ways to try to depict this. And clearly, if we go back to the moon, it's not going to cost the same amount in proportion to anything. It's not going to require the time, the level of effort in terms of number of people that it costs during that particular time. What is the difference? I can't tell you what it would be at this point. I'm sure there's people in NASA that have studied this in great detail. But yes, it will not be the same amount. But it will be something more than what is presently available. At least I believe so.
I'll note that also when we're talking about that spike at the beginning, you're talking about building major space centers, Marshall Space Flight Center, Kennedy Space Center, Johnson Space Center. This infrastructure that now exists, right? And also is building the workforce. A lot of NASA money in the early 60s went to colleges and universities to build buildings and laboratories to train the workforce. And that stuff's all still there. So there's a, yeah, you don't have to spike quite as much as in the future.
And we've been working on this part of going to the moon for quite a while. Right. So there's a little area under the curve.
Yep. All right, other questions? Sir, right here.
Yeah. My name is Tom Comedius.
Oh, thank you.
My name is Tom Comedius. I happen to be principal investigator on Voyager 1 and 2, and I'm bringing this up because in the early 70s, we were building the Voyager instruments, and we pushed the technology of microelectronics to great extent to fit the criteria for great power and computing power as well. So vis-a-vis the last point of Professor Lanius, I think that the push for technology that will spawn by the dispersion of all the big exponential radio labs actually is not only due to the Apollo program but also the robotic exploration program.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm wondering what your view on that is.
Oh, I would agree.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right.
Yeah, totally. No, I think you're absolutely right. It's pushed in a variety of ways, and Apollo was one of those.
And of course, the Apollo program was important to build that community. You know, there were 22 missions to and around the moon, flyby orbits, landing. before we did the Apollos. And then 8 more missions with the interplanetary monitoring platforms, the IMPs, to monitor the region between us and the moon. So that's the magnetosphere, solar wind, and Van Allen radiation belts. And so that was all infrastructure in that community that was being built before we sent the Apollos. And of course, we're doing that now with Mars. You know, it's human exploration for NASA is not Star Trek. It's not go where no human has gone before. You know, we send out and we want to understand the environments, and that's why our robotic technologies, or our scientific community is really at the forefront to then allow human exploration to follow.
Next question. Sir.
Hi, I'm Alan Boyle with Deepwire, and I wanted to ask Buzz Aldrin, you were talking about how maybe the gateway is not the right way to go, but in terms of getting back to the moon, there has been a movement to do this by 2024 by any means possible. Is it possible that just the political realities mean that we've got to go on this path in order to do what we want to do, getting back to the moon?
Okay, you can make permission to do that? 2 minutes. No mention was made in the significance of Apollo of one decision, and that was how do you get there? We all know we need a big rocket, and we need a lander, and we need some way, but how do you do it? There was a big decision after a big debate, and it was decided not to send an even bigger rocket than the Saturn V, a Nova rocket. No way to buy it and get it by 1970 or 71. So the Marshall Space Flight Center had to use 2 of these. One of them to put a big propulsion system into space, and then another one to put this big spacecraft that was going to go on a Nova rocket, but put it into orbit, then join them together around the Earth and go to the moon. And this spacecraft was pretty big, because it would end up doing everything. It would do the landing, come on up, and then come all the way back. And it was the genius of an engineer who analyzed what it is you need. You need a spacecraft that can get there, and it comes back, it's got a service module, we'll get rid of the service module, and then the crew will get out of the spacecraft in the ocean. Now when it gets to the moon, you need a lander. Take the lander along with you. Then when you get to the moon, 2 guys get in the lander, they drop down. 1 guy keeps orbiting. 1 rocket, 2 spacecraft, 1 lands, the other stays there, the other one comes up and does what? Lunar orbit rendezvous. 1 engineer pioneered that idea. And to me, being an orbital mechanics transportation guy, that's what made Apollo successful. It had been too expensive. Not that we couldn't have done it, but not as many times. And it was that critical decision And it wasn't unanimous. There were pretty high-level people, including Dr. Von Braun. That was not what he wanted to do. I think we're at a crucial point today. I do not believe that we need a facility around the moon, a station. If we can do away with not having. I don't believe we need a station going around the Earth, except for research at the International Space Station, but as part of the transportation system, lifting off from the Earth, doing some things around, then going vicinity to the moon, then landing. You don't have to go through an interim like a gateway. Now, there are reasons why the gateway is there. Will anyone argue the fact that the best rocket that the United States has, heavy lift, is the Space Launch System? Would anybody argue that our best spacecraft is the Orion spacecraft? Well, let me tell you that SLS cannot get Orion to lunar orbit with any particular maneuver capability. And that is why we have to go into an orbit that is not quite close enough, and now we have to build a big spacecraft there. And we got to go to that, and then from this orbit, we make a landing, and it takes 3 spacecraft to make a landing. Now, I have a better technique, as somebody
Not yet.
said, Buzz, all you've done is taken the gateway. Now, in order to get there to 2024, you can't use the big gateway, you gotta use just a small mini. He says, Buzz, you've taken the gateway, and you just move it between low Earth orbit, lunar orbit, then it comes back again. And it's moving all the time. When it goes, you take an Orion with it, and then the Orion separates and comes down, enters the atmosphere, and this lunar, or the trans-orbit spacecraft has got solar collectors, so it comes back slowly, saving fuel, a month or so, back to the orbit for the next mission to the moon. Well, we keep doing that with Orion, but it always comes back to Earth, and it's not reusable. We want to reuse, we need something that goes from Earth orbit to lunar orbit, comes back to Earth orbit with a crew in it. That means it has to do that rapidly. That means it has to aero capture when it comes back. But we don't have one of those. Well, we can develop one in 3 or 4 years. So now we take the aero capture up. It goes with the transorbit craft. It comes back, the transorbit craft comes back on its own again. And now the Buzz craft, that's the name of this craft, buzzes the atmosphere, slows down, and is in Earth orbit. Now the old crew, commercial crew, spacecraft launch, goes up, takes a maintenance crew up there. The old crew comes down. Now the maintenance crew stays in the Buzz craft for a couple of months until we're ready to go back to the moon. And they inspect and make any changes. Then we get ready to go back to the moon again. We send a commercial rocket launch up. The new crew is there, the maintenance people come down. So we got a trans-orbit craft, and we got some, it's pretty heavy. There's absolutely no way that the Space Launch System would do that. So we need 2 commercial spacecraft. to Falcon Heavy, about a month apart, maybe a new blend. These are reusable. SLS is not. SLS can deliver cargo. Politically, we can't cancel SLS. We all know that. Politics and big company persistence.
So Professor
Vested
Longton,
interest, big companies, lobbyists, Congress, that is what has messed up our program.
I understand Professor Weiss is going to have a session with Buzz later this week to talk about those issues.
I'll hide it.
Okay, thank you. John, you want to say something?
No, I'm just a facilitator.
Thank you. How about some other questions? In the front.
Thank you. Serge Platin from University College London. You mentioned the possibility between when we are going to come back to the moon and you are going to come back to the moon, particularly in 2028. Probably you're going to use a lot of robots and robotic systems on the moon. If the LOP is the final solution, are those robots will be managed from the LOP? Or are going to have something coming on the moon, sort of station, and from that station you will pilot a net of robots who do a rather distant exploration. You haven't said many things about how the organization of the exploration would take place in a sustainable way, starting, if I understand properly, around 2028. Because we have more insights about that.
Well, nobody's talking about 2028 anymore, Serge, for one thing. Where all the focus is getting back by 2024. And what's gotten hidden, in my view.
I'm sorry, I have heard that it was a first shot for 2024 and that it
Yeah, let
will
me
be sustainable starting in 2028, if I understand, and read properly, and heard properly what I heard.
But what is not clear from official NASA so far is what follows the initial mission. What architecture, what arrangements, the kind of questions you're asking, where the control center, where people are, what's Artemis 4 look like, or 5 or 6. With the focus on the 2024, we've kind of lost the overall system architecture of a lunar campaign, and I hope some of that will begin to come out this week.
It will be. Indeed, tomorrow afternoon, in the session I'll be presenting at 3 o'clock, will be a discussion. Oh, sorry. Tomorrow afternoon at a session at 3 o'clock, we'll talk about Artemis Phase 1 and Artemis Phase 2. There'll be quite a few talks this week about more details of the robotic program and utilization of the gateway and more plans about the Artemis 1 set of missions. So the Artemis 1 has Phase 1 has 3 missions associated with it, and that gets us to 2024. And then there'll be several more after that, which will be Phase 2.
And you say, Jim, that some detail of those missions will be...
There are some notional concepts that will be presented, yeah.
So stand by for more later this week.
Yeah, this is a good week.
Thanks for the question, sir. Over there, yes.
I'm Manuel Romero from 3F France. We have been told how much it costs, how many persons were working on the Apollo project, and it represents a very vast amount of persons working on that, thousands of persons. All these persons have learned something. And after that, they have worked, and what they have learned has been applied to industry. Is there some study to have an idea of what are the benefits, or maybe no benefits, of this huge human capital that have been developed during Apollo.
So human capital question from Apollo. Do you want to take that one?
What was the question,
I think the question was,
The acoustics is up here are horrible, by the way.
yeah, the sound bounces pretty badly, but I think the question was, if I got this right, that have there been any studies about the effect of all that human capital that was developed for Apollo that then seeded other areas, which I think touches on a point that Roger made.
I'm not.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, I have not seen specific studies that go anything beyond sort of anecdotal. I would love to see those. I'd love to see some serious investigation of proliferation of technologies and how they were advanced in the context of sort of knowledge movement, because that's really what we're talking about. I think Howard's done a little bit of work on culture. The organizational culture at NASA and how it changed over time, but I don't know that this deals with that, does it? Or do you want to try to address it?
You want culture, you want money.
Fine, either one.
Yes, please.
Any return to the moon is going to be built on an incremental basis on the existing NASA budget. That's a given. There's not going to be a crash program to go back to the moon. So if there's a gap between the NASA budget and what it actually takes to go back, there's a thought that may be filled by the private sector. You got an example of Jeff Bezos who's putting up $1 billion a year of his own money into Blue Origin to develop new technologies. And on top of that is the realization the actual trips to the moon cost less than $500 million. Apollo 11 didn't cost more than $500 million, but it was built on a base of $17 billion of preparation, ground stations, communication, orbital rendezvous, a lot of technology, and a lot of smart decisions that went into that. That 17 could have been twice that if we'd gone with the Nova rocket. But it was a smart technology financed by government. I think one of the breakthroughs that may occur in the next round is that the financing may change substantially. It's got to come out of the economy one way or the other. There's no guarantee that it has to come out of the U.S. Treasury, the whole thing out of the U.S. Treasury. So people in the private sector are willing to make these investments if the payoffs are real. And they're very clever in the way they leverage the accomplishments that they've done to date with their opportunity to get additional capital. And that may provide enough of a margin to close the gap financially between the incremental NASA budget and what the United States and its international partners are willing to contribute to the overall activity. Just one more thing, can I ask? I know the answer to this question. On orbital rendezvous, didn't somebody do a doctoral dissertation on that subject?
To bring the private sector in, I'm not sure that SpaceX working with NASA or Blue Origin working with NASA is going to change things very much. They're going to go do their thing. But if there is this space exploration alliance, where we get NASA, ESA, Russia, Japan, China, working on something somewhere, a plan, now there are increased markets. There are increased reasons for SpaceX and Blue Origin to share and to work with the rest of the world. And I think that's the way it should be done. International should work with private sectors, not just in the U.S., but in other places. And this alliance should make room for expansion for India, Australia, Saudi Emirates, and other that reach the level of capability. Now, obviously, SpaceX has that capability, and so does Blue Origin, but it's rather narrowly directed based upon the desires of the return, not particularly the desires of, in our country, the National Space Council, for the U.S. But I think it's going to require a bigger international organization to bring around a consensus of a plan. What is the plan for space exploration? Who can offer what? Who wants to get out of that? And how do we make decisions? I don't think the UN is a good model for that. I don't know what is, but that's a challenge, a real challenge.
That's definitely is a big challenge. And actually, you raised a really good point. Maybe ultimately we should bring this up with the history committee about the fact that, about studies, maybe doing some historical studies on what the impact of the dissemination of information and knowledge was around the system. I think that'd be a great project. All right, in the back. Way in the back there, sir?
Thank you, Rodney, This is a very traditional enlightening insights. I was wondering if you pull on that thread even further, if you look at the historical context of exploration, transition, colonization, we actually start bringing over all the rest of the resources needed to colonize. And I was wondering if there's any case studies that you guys apply to either technology-wise or like socioeconomic-wise for demographics that could lead to future lessons learned. Because if you look back at like the British East Indies Trading Company, that was like a public-private partnership. Perhaps.
So,
or the western expansion, 40 acres of renewal. How do you incentivize people to go west after you get the railroads?
So, I'm just trying to understand, the question is...
Repeat the question.
Maybe it's more here than that as something, but they're basically looking at case studies to figure out how to move from exploration to colonization when you actually start. Because right now they're nationalistic astronauts. So when you look at Blue Origin and SpaceX, now it's sort of normalized astronauts for 5 years.
Good question, and I think Roger wrote a monograph for NASA history about this very subject, about the parallels between other exploration.
It's basically, what I looked at was public-private partnerships in history and how they led to certain kinds of things. And you can find it online and download it if you'd like.
It's free.
So it's free. It's on the NASA site. But there's not a lot of, that I've seen anyway, that deals with sort of colonization. And the things that I looked at, there was things like the railroads, for instance. How do we foster the building of the railroads? There was a whole series of actions that were taken, and they took a variety of forms depending upon the entity that was engaged in them. The most famous, of course, is the Transcontinental Railroad that was sponsored in the context of land grants and so forth by the Congress. But there's other instances, and there are a variety of ways in which you can stimulate commercial development of things, and that's what this is about. It did not look at the issue of colonization, which is sort of a different question. And it's not to say that nobody's done it, but I've not seen it. I think it would be something worth looking at.
I was just looking this up as far as cheating on my phone here. Historical analogs for the stimulation of space commerce. Look that up. That's Roger's book, available for free PDF download from NASA.gov. Sir.
My name is Roman Tedarashvili. I'm professor of physics at the University of New York. One of the conclusions which I made from today's talk is that it was few motivations why the United States became the leader in the space race. It was October 4, 1957, the first Sputnik, April 12, 1961, the first man around the moon, around the Earth, Yuri Gagarin, and all this plus Cold War motivated success of the United States. And first of all, it motivated a huge achievement in STEM education. So my question is, what should happen now that the United States again will become a leader and repeat the success and go further in no race which we have now?
Okay, so the question is, what does the United States need to do to become a leader?
No, what kind of event should happen? You know, again, Cold War or what? The budget of NASA will increase 10 times again. What we need?
Good, okay. John?
Well, first, the last thing we need is another Cold War.
Yeah.
You know, as several of us have said, we live, probably you did, also under the threat of nuclear war. That's not something you want to do as a basis for anything, much less stimulating a space program. And as Howard said, the particular set of circumstances that came together in 1961 that led to the decision to do Apollo and basically sustained it for enough time to get the momentum forward was unique. So your question is, what could happen like that again? And McCurdy said it. We don't know. If you knew and could predict and manage and control it, that would be great. But that kind of concentrated effort comes out of a particular historical context that emerges, not is created.
Good point, John. We have time for one more question. So, back there, young lady? Young lady behind you, I'm afraid. Please.
Sorry about that, Louis. I'm Rachel Tillman, the director and founder of the Viking Mars Missions Education and Preservation Project. My father was a scientist in the Viking mission, so I grew up with Apollo Viking. But one of the concerns that I have, and I want to ask each of you gentlemen who have participated, particularly those of you who participated in the space exploration. I'm a historian of the committee, so I'm just kind of following it all. But I'm the mother of a 14-year-old. Kids today do not see the world the same way that we do, or those of you that have been there before us. They are not nationalistic. They do not see people based on their gender, their race, their culture, or anything else. They will not follow a program that is set in place or in motion right now by any of us if we do not consider the world that they want to see, because they're the ones that are going to go there. So what I would like to ask each of you is, what would you like to put in motion now, Buzz? What would you like to put in motion now that has not been discussed, that will look not just forward, but at children now, to communicate with them and create a world that is appealing to them, that they will support?
Well, I'll take somebody gave me the mic, so I'll say it first. I think to give them the sense that what we do in space is critical to their future, the world they're going to be an adult in a way that they want to be as they mature. I don't think that message gets across very well, but I think it is, we're asking the next generation and generations after that to support the continuation and sustainability of a productive space program. They have to see a reason to do it in their interest.
Thanks, John. I think that we're already 5 minutes over the scheduled time, and so we're going to wrap up here. We'd like to remind everybody that the History Committee will be meeting later this week several times. Oak, do you want to say anything more?
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to thank you everybody here for attending this afternoon session. So thank you very much for hosting this, and the whole panel, thank you very much for coming. Was brought up earlier the question who actually is here in the room who witnessed the Apollo 11 launch? You don't count.
You didn't see it. Who saw actually the real launch? And if so, maybe we can later on, after we're done, can have a picture then with Buzz Aldrin, the people who actually saw the real launch. The only other 2 points that I wanted to bring up, it's really kind of interesting to see that most of the items that we discussed here were in regards to the future. So whoever says, oh, history is boring, no, it's just the opposite. We came here to talk about history and we talk much more about the future. We're still going to hear history, 3 sessions that the History Committee is going to have. One of them on Thursday afternoon, I mentioned already Rhoda Hornstein, and many other Apollo-related items. Thank you very much, and thank you very much again to the panel here.
Okay, now back left.